Hi, I'm Susie, and I design and press cookie press discs. We have more than 250 shapes and over 30 themes, designed and manufactured right here in the United States by our small family-owned company. Now you might be thinking that a cookie press is just for Christmas and Christmas trees, but I want you to think again, because I'm going to show you how to get creative with your cookie press all year long. Hi again from sunny Colorado. Today I'm showing you how to make chocolate mint St. Patrick's Day cookies. We're going to be tinting the dough green and using our 4-leaf clover, shamrock, and rainbow with a pot of gold discs. We're going to be making a chocolate mint filling to turn them into sandwich cookies, and then the only decorating we're going to do in this video is just to take the colors of the rainbow in icing and just pipe them onto the rainbows to make them into rainbows, and then just a little bit of gold sprinkles to fill up that pot of gold. So let's go ahead and get started. I am an absolute broken record about this, and I say it in every video, but the foundation to a really great Spritz cookie is to cream your butter really, really well. So take your electric mixer and set it on the highest setting and pretend you're making frosting or some other whipped dessert. And form some nice little peaks in your butter and wait for it to turn from that kind of brighter yellow it comes out of the fridge with until it turns to something just a little bit lighter. And then you'll have a great foundation. This is looking really good. I'm going to tip it up and show you in the close-up camera what I mean about that butter kind of changing color and forming neat little peaks. So there you can see what I'm talking about. And our next step in this, and I think I forgot to mention, it's a powdered sugar Spritz cookie, but we're going to make it mint with mint extract instead of just plain. Our next step is just to add the powdered sugar. So I'll get my beaters back on in here and add this a little bit at a time because it's never good to inhale powdered sugar, and if you're doing it too fast it's going to fluff up in your face. With the sugar all incorporated, I've got a nice fluffy base here, and my next step in this recipe is just to add my wet ingredients, which are 2 teaspoons of mint extract and a teaspoon of vanilla. I gave it one last good whip when adding those last wet ingredients, and once you have the flour mixture, which this is flour and baking powder and salt, you don't want to really whip it again. You want to just get everything nicely incorporated so that the flour is evenly distributed. With the flour completely incorporated, I'm now going to take a look at my dough. I also say this in every video, that there's always a way to tweak a recipe if it isn't quite coming out the way you want. So you want to make sure that your Spritz have a dough that's of a certain consistency that's kind of like Play-Doh. So let me pull this out here, come to the close-up camera, and I'm going to show you guys what I'm talking about. Spritz dough that's done really well is going to break apart in your hands really cleanly like this. Actually, this looks pretty good. Sometimes this particular powdered sugar dough can get a little bit stiff, kind of depending on your humidity, how well you measured things like that. So remember that if this dough was too sticky, if it was sticking to my hands all over the place, or if it was just so difficult to break that it didn't feel soft and malleable like this, I'd tweak the dough by either adding a tablespoon of water if it was too stiff, or a tablespoon of flour if it was too soft or sticky. But this looks pretty good, so we're going to go ahead and try to press it out. Actually, no, the first thing we have to do is color it. So let me get my coloring supplies and we'll get to it. I divided my dough into 2 different bowls, and what we're going to do is use our hands and a spoon to color the dough into Kelly green and leaf green. You always want to use a gel food coloring because a liquid is going to change the consistency of your dough and make it a little runnier, and we don't want that. So use a gel because that'll help maintain your consistency. So I'm going to start with the leaf green here. This is one I've already opened. And I like to use toothpicks and just reach in and grab just a blob. See, kind of a blob going on there. And just drag it and poke it into your dough. And start with just a little bit because you can always add more, but you can't take it out. And I'll give Mr. Bear my toothpicks because we don't want to double dip because you don't want to contaminate your coloring with any ingredients that are in your dough. So I'm using 2 dips here. We'll start with that. Make nice bright green cookies. So 2 dips and poke it in. And it's Mr. Bear. And I always start with a spoon just to get these really big blobs. I don't want them to end up on my hands, although it does wash off pretty easily. But just to get it started. So just kind of smear it in a little bit. And then once I get it going, I'll pick it up and work it with my hands. If that kind of grosses you out, just keep using the spoon, but I find it a lot faster with my hands. And because I'm using two different colors, I didn't want to use the mixer because then I'd have to wash everything. So just going to do it by hand today. As you see, I'm just folding it around and just slowly getting everything kind of smushed in. Alright, Mr. Bear, take my spoon. He's so helpful. And I'm going to pick it up and just watch me work it in. Okay, with those last couple squeezes, I have a color that I think looks really nice. This will make for very pretty shamrocks and four-leaf clovers. And again, I've got that nice breakable texture, so the dough has held up well. See, it breaks. Held up well to coloring. I'm going to color the other dough, and then we'll get right to pressing them. With the dough colored, it's time to get to pressing. I'm going to start with, I think, what is this, leaf green. So let's go for the leaf green, and my favorite way to pack a cookie press barrel is to just take little pieces of it and pack it in with the back of a spoon. I find that that eliminates the air bubbles that can form in the barrel, and you don't want those in there because they're going to be the problem that makes your cookies come out misshapen. Because if there's tighter packed dough on one side than the other, your shapes will come out bigger on one side and smaller on the other, or missing pieces, and you don't want that because what's cool about Spritz cookies is all these neat shapes. So just pack it on in. See, get rid of all those air bubbles. Okay, the first thing that I always say to do when pressing is to click a couple of clicks into the air, one or two, to get your dough to begin to extrude. And remember that the first few cookies often come out really junky, or it takes quite a few to get them started. That one I kind of lost the stem a little bit. So my pressure might be a little bit off, we'll see. Nope, that came out just fine. I find that the shamrocks and the clovers, you really want to press them in a nice, slow, even rhythm. Nope, lost another stem there. So that tells me my pressure is set a little bit off. There we go. All right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click a full click into the air, extrude a bunch of dough, and that resets the pressure. That's always a great trick if you get out of a rhythm. So let's try it again. Nice slow click, and maybe since these are a little big, they'll take a click and a tap. Sometimes a click and a tap is what you need. Always think of a cookie press as a dough pump. If you want smaller cookies and you don't want to use a full click, assuming you have a one click per cookie type press, just do less than a click. Or if you want them nice and big, make more than a click. Always just think of this as a way to get dough onto the cookie sheet. And sometimes if you miss a little piece like that, you can hand place it back on. That's okay. So I'm going to do just one more. I did 2 clicks on that, so it's a much bigger shamrock. You can probably see that in the close-up camera. Those last 2 are different sizes because the one I didn't quite do a click and this one I did 2. However you like them to look, just do it that way. So now I'm going to switch out my discs. I'm going to keep any dough I've got left. So I'm going to hand my disc to Mr. Bear, my helper, and switch to the 4-leaf clover. And again, same thing, you can put it in either direction, and eventually maybe I'll do them both ways, we'll see. Doesn't really matter either way. Make sure your disc is centered nicely. Extrude a little into the air. Ooh, that one had a lot, so I'm going to wipe that away, but that should have set the pressure nicely in this barrel, so let's see what happens. Nice, slow, even click, and that looks just fine. Bunch of 4-leaf clovers, and these are pretty dainty, so I'm going to try not to go too long. I feel like my pressure is off. Yep, I could feel it wasn't quite sticking. So that one I'll probably throw back in the bowl. There we go. Coming out just fine. Alright, so any of these fatter ones I'm just going to toss back in here. Besides I want to leave, I don't really like that one either. I'm going to leave a little room to do the rainbows with a pot of gold. Just want to press out enough just to show you guys how these come out and kind of what kind of technique it should take. And of course this works with different kinds of presses too. If you have an electric or a twist press, same kind of thing. Let's set the pressure in the barrel. I am almost out of dough, so let's just get a few of these out and you'll certainly get the hint of how this is done. These tend to come out kind of big, so you want to go a little bit light. Don't do really hard clicks. There we go. You want them to have a really nice definition. I'm out of dough, but I'm going to hold this up and show you what I mean here. Show you everything that's on here. Let's begin with the rainbows. This one is a lot bigger, and you really want them to come out nice and tight like these guys up here, because that's just going to keep your definition a little better. These are nice tiny little shamrocks. or 4-leaf clovers, sorry, and there's some nice looking shamrocks up there. So I'm going to get these into the oven for about 6 to 10 minutes. My cookies are all pressed and out of the oven. They take anywhere from 6 to 10 minutes to bake. In my oven, it almost always takes about 7. But I like to say 6 or 10 because all ovens are different and they're going to bake at different times. So check them early and often because once Spritz cookies start to brown, they go really quickly. So you don't want to miss them and end up with brown burned edges. I took some of my favorite of the, which is this, the leaf green ones off of the cookie sheet. And I always say to let them sit for about 3 or 4 minutes before you remove them, because if you take them off too quickly, they might break. And if you let them wait too long, they could stick to your pan and they might break also. So just give them a few minutes and then you'll be just fine. While I'm letting my Kelly green ones sit for just a minute, I'm going to get started on making our chocolate mint filling. This is a very, very simple filling, and I want you to not think of it as a kind of icing because it's not going to be that thin. It's supposed to be thick, kind of like the stuffing of a sandwich cookie, because it is the stuffing of a sandwich cookie. So I have some room temperature butter here, some powdered sugar, some unsweetened cocoa powder, and some mint extract, and that's all we're going to be using. And if you want to tweak the consistency of it a little bit, if you like it fluffier and lighter and thinner or a little thicker, you can add a little more powdered sugar, or you can add a little more mint extract or a little water, whatever you want. But this is just kind of the basic middle of the road version that I found was working well. The first thing I'm going to do is just take a spoon and kind of smush this butter around a little bit. Get it worked in. You don't have to cream it like you're making cookies, but just sort of get it ready to accept another ingredient. Okay, with my butter a little bit creamed up, I'm going to start by adding some of the powdered sugar. I'm going to add it a little at a time because I don't want an enormous cloud like I already have. Got the beginnings of this incorporated, so I'm going to start adding a little bit of the cocoa powder at a time. And you can do the same thing with the cocoa. You can add a little bit more or a little bit less. I made it a little darker than I did for some of the other chocolate stuffed recipes that I've done in the past. I'm just swirling it on in here. This is a little bit darker, it goes nicely with the mint. And the reason I don't do this with an electric mixer is because it is going to end up very, very thick. And it's a lot easier to just do it by hand. So I'm just going to keep going and get everything incorporated. At this point, it's looking really crumbly and really dry. And you'll be thinking, wow, how am I ever going to get this all incorporated? So that's a good point at which to start adding your mint extract. Just sort of dribble it all through. And if you need to, just like the dough, use your hands and get it in here and think of it as therapy. Take out any stress you have. Just like I said about dough, humidity can really affect things. So this is turning out a little stiffer than I want because we are going to be piping it through a pretty big nozzle, but it still has to get through. So I'm going to add just a little bit of water at a time until I have a workable consistency. This is just slightly too stiff. But I like to show the mistakes and the troubleshooting that I do because I want you to realize things don't always go perfectly with a recipe and that it's totally okay to have to troubleshoot a little bit. Even the best recipes sometimes need just a little tweak. There, that's going to be a lot easier to work with. But again, it's not as thin as something you'd be spreading on a cake. I'm actually going to get my hand in here and give it one last little squeeze. I took a second to finish off working this with my hands and get washed up and to get also the Kelly Green cookies off of their cookie sheet and onto the cooling rack because I didn't want them to sit too long while I was busy doing this. So now I've got the close-up camera in tight and I went ahead and put, what is this? It's a number 10, kind of a large hole, Wilton round tip into a piping bag. And now what we're going to do is take these little 4-leaf clovers and shamrocks and we're going to add the filling to them. And I didn't flip them, so I'm just going to stack them on top of each other, meaning that they're both going to be facing the same direction, and we're just going to stack them like this. You could also have pressed one in the opposite direction, like this, and then put them face to face that way. So for now, I'm just going to show you how to go about piping this on here. And it's very, very, very simple, but I just wanted you to get a feel for how thick this filling is because it is really, really super thick. Even with this super wide nozzle, it's going to take quite a bit of strength for me to get this out of here. So what you want to do, because this makes really pretty edges, of course you could do this with a spoon, but if you do it with the piping bag, it's going to make these pretty little edges. See? makes these nice smooth little edges. I don't know how I can do this without without losing my grip here, but I don't want my hand in the way. So finish your outline. Oop, there we go. And then fill in the middle just with a blob of chocolate. Chocolate mint, yum, yum, yum. And then just take your other cookie and just place it on top. And you might want to kind of smoosh it around a little bit, kind of wiggle it so it'll stick well, and then give it a press so that it kind of shows out the little edges there. So now you've got an obvious thick sandwich cookie. It's kind of like a double stuffed. And you could always stuff them thinner if you wanted to. I just like them really, really thick. So that was a 4-leaf clover in the Kelly green. Let me just do one more and show you again how this works. So do the stem, put a little blob there, and then just, get in the camera here, Suze. Come around the edges. Just outline your cookie. This is much harder to do when I'm trying to show it to you guys. And back around the third lobe. Oh, doesn't quite want to stick. Okay, and then fill up your middle. And you don't have to do it very precisely because it's all going to get smushed down together. Okay, now take your, and you know, this way you can put your prettiest ones on top and your, maybe the ones that didn't come out exactly as you wanted on the bottom. Center it nicely over your chocolate. Give it a little squeeze, and then it makes a nice little outline so that it looks like there's a chocolate outline to this cookie, which I think is kind of cool. And it shows up very pretty on the edges again. That's all there is to doing the shamrocks and the 4-leaf clovers. We're not going to give them any other decorating because they really don't need it, and they're going to be sweet and exciting, and that's pretty cool. So let me go ahead and get my rainbow colors of icing, and I'll show you really quickly how to just jazz up these little rainbows with a pot of gold. As I often do in my videos, I'm keeping things simple today, and I'm using store-bought colored icing and readily available materials and tips because I want you guys to know that I'm not doing something that fancy that's out of your reach. But if you want to go ahead and make some decorating icing and tint it yourself, by all means go for it. We're going to start to do our rainbows by making the little pot that the gold is going to sit in. And for that, I figured why not just use the chocolate, because you know, why add one more color here? So we're going to use the chocolate and just come into the little pot here on our pot of gold. Let's see. I'll do this in my hand. Turn around for you guys. Whee! I'm getting used to this really, really close camera. And I'm just going to pipe some of this on here. Just kind of outline and fill in where the pot's going to be. And then I'm going to take a little dipping bowl of water here and just dampen, not soaking wet my finger, and then I'm going to tap this down. Just going to tap it down until it has a nice smooth surface and it covers where the pot of gold is. And it doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to give it some color. Okay, so there's our pot. I'm going to set it back down, and then we're going to add a little bit of orange color because the orange goes nicely with the little gold sparkles that I'm going to be using here. So now I'm just going to squiggle some gold kind of along the top of this. Whoops. Watch out, this stuff can come out fast. I'm just going to squiggle some orange on here, and that's going to be the foundation that holds the gold sprinkles on. And you can do it as messy as you want. There is nothing that has to be fancy about this. And again, I'm going to use a slightly damp finger and just tap it down and make a wet surface that these sprinkles will be able to stick to. And I'm doing it kind of messy, like the gold is just kind of falling in and out of that pot. Just squish it around however you think it's going to look good. And then take your sprinkles. Let me show you that. See, there's just a little thing of orange right there. And now all I'm going to do to that, it's a little bit tricky, is just tap it out really gently. Tap, 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 until your gold fills up that orange space. And it can kind of fall around, that's just fine. It's all going to stick really nicely once the icing's set. And give it a little tap. So now you have a pot of gold that's full of gold. And the orange just is less offensive when it shows through a little bit. All right, so now that we've got our pot of gold done, we're going to go for doing the rainbow stripe. You could work the rainbows from either side. You could either go from the outside red into the purple or from the purple outside to the red. But I'm going to try this time starting with the purple on the inside. And you want to put the purple on that first inner ridge, and then put the blue next to it, and then let the green kind of fall in the crack. And the nice thing is that you're going to have guidelines so that you're not having to freehand exact half circles on a regular cookie. It's kind of nice to have those little ridges there as lines to guide you. So I'm going to start with the purple, and I'm just going to trace this inner ridge. Try to use a nice even stroke so that you have a nice even little line. Okay, and then the blue is just going to go right next to it. Try to start with a clean tip, because otherwise you'll have little blobs of it around. And just trace right alongside your first color. And sort of make a little dot at the end. That helps to keep it clean on the edges. All right, here comes green. Like I said, it's going to go into the ridge, or into the gap here. Kind of fill that up. If your cookies have really high ridges, you could even do the green stripe twice to fill in that space. But it is so nice to have that, that ridge there to guide you. Yellow. Orange is after that. Oh, my tip's a little dirty there. And I'm going to squish this yellow in a little bit. Kind of got off track a little. Use a slightly damp finger to just sort of move it over a little. There you go. Okay, on to the orange. There we go. And then our red. Ta-da! Takes a little bit of effort, but I think it's worth it. It has a really neat, it's very hard to pick up when they're wet, so I wouldn't recommend trying to do what I'm trying to do. I would wait until they're dry before you pick them up, but there you go. A cookie with a rainbow, with gold sprinkles in the little chocolate pot, and they go nicely with our shamrocks and our 4-leaf clovers. With that last technique shown, that's all there is for today's video. You can get a feel from all of the close-up shots that I did with a still camera of how these rainbows come together and how the filling goes onto the shamrocks and the 4-leaf clovers. So with that, I'm going to wrap up for today. I'm going to wish you all a very happy St. Patrick's Day. I want to thank you for watching, and as always, happy baking from Impress Bakeware.